All right, good morning, everyone. We are once again back. Week one has started as usual. Actually, this time I'm with both Jed and Jimmy in Chicago. So welcome both to both of you guys.
Good morning.
Good. Week one started, Jed.
I know, it's exciting. It's fun. It's good to finally see. It was a good game. Well, it wasn't a good game, but it was good to see a lot of kind of what we had thought with some of those with Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie. It's good to see both of those play out well.
Yeah, Jim, what struck, I think we could sit there and talk about Josh Allen. We'll talk about him being the player of the game. But what struck, was it the Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis? Was it Isaiah McKenzie or even the running backs as well? Well, then the running backs didn't really do anything. But what struck you about the game?
Well, there's three things I think we were talking about, right? One, Stafford did not look good. And so he's either injured or he's just lost so much off of his throwing arm. And I think we saw that he had, 3 interceptions yesterday. He did not have many throws. He was looking for Cooper Kupp all night. And so I think from a fantasy perspective, he only got, 8 to 10 points yesterday. I think the second thing, Darrell Henderson out-touched Cam Akers 18-3. And so that's actually a cause of concern, right? One is you better pick up Henderson on your waiver wire. And two, what's really going on with Cam Akers? Is he injured or is it going to be a slow progression for him to come back as well, too? And then the third one is the two people that I was thinking might be good this year on Buffalo outside of Diggs and Davis, James Cook, as well as also Dawson Knox. They did not do well. Dawson Knox scored 1.5 fantasy points. James Cook had 1 fumble, and he was out the rest of the game. So who knows what's going to happen for them. But some people might be dumping the James Cook, so this might be a good time to swoop him up here.
Yeah, and Dawson Knox. I was just going to say, as we've said every year, don't jump too quick off of the first 2 games. The first 2 games are always a little tricky. I think especially on the Rams side, when you see them lose, obviously a lot of concern. But, I would just kind of hold your horses a little bit. For those Cam Akers owners, don't go dropping Cam Akers right away. Let's just kind of see how it plays out a little bit. Because oftentimes, teams are just trying to figure out what they got and then kind of go from there.
Now, the person I was disappointed by, I really thought Allen Robinson was going to have a good game. One of those games where he's going to try to stick it to the Bears and say, look, I'm actually better than you people thought. But he only had 2 receptions. But here's the thing, Stafford wasn't targeting him at all last night.
Yeah. Well, they had that
for 12 yards.
Yeah, and before that, they showed a couple times. I don't know if you saw on the on the broadcast that he was looking for him and they just weren't on the same page, because they haven't had that time together. Like there was that one crossing pattern where he needed to kind of sit in the zone and Stafford was kind of waiting for him and then he didn't, and then he went away from him. So, Robinson is too good of a talent for Stafford to not eventually figure that out. But the bigger concern is really his arm, because he did not look that sharp, didn't have that same kind of zip, and so we just got to see if he's still totally recovered from. Remember, he did have an off-season procedure, so we got to see.
Yeah.
So, Jen, let me ask you a quick question about Allen Robinson. For you, a lot of times he had a bad year last year. He was just terrible. Yesterday, 1 catch, 12 yards. You're saying this is more of an anomaly than anything else. In the weeks ahead, he'll definitely do better.
Well, I'm saying they had from a pure true football standpoint, I think you got to wait and give them time. From a fantasy perspective, I'd be fine dropping him. I think you hopefully weren't depending on him as anything more than maybe even like a wide receiver 3 or a flex position. But I would be comfortable cutting bait on him now as far as fantasy. But I think longer term, I think they're going to figure him out.
Honestly, a lot of times, Jed, I was looking at him more as a wide receiver 2 on my team. And actually, I drafted him a lot after Cortland Sutton in one of my leagues, him as the second receiver. But at the same time, I'm still high on him. I'm hoping to make some trade for him this week for Allen Robinson.
That's actually a really good strategy. I mean, we'll talk about trade strategies later on, but I'm sure Judge was going to say this. There's going to be a number of players that people are going to look after this first week and say, no, they stink, right? And they're going to cut them immediately. It's going to be reactionary. Allen Robinson's going to be one of those people. There's no way they're going to they can rely on Cooper Kupp the entire time. Yesterday, all they kept doing was looking for Cooper Kupp. At some point, these defenses are just going to double team them, and they're going to force them to have to throw to Allen Robinson.
Did anybody notice, though, who was on the sideline for the Rams?
No. OBJ.
OBJ was on the sidelines. I told you guys he's coming back. Just wait.
I thought about you because there was a point in the game where I forgot who was saying they were like, you better watch out for OBJ. Yep. They like him, you know, and I'm sure he's sitting there thinking, I could do better than these people out there.
Yeah, Chris Collinsworth was saying that. I mean, basically, it's the you know, typical situation for a veteran is basically like, I'm just going to wait out the first 6 weeks. Someone's going to get hurt, and then I'm going to pick the situation that I can go in and maybe win a championship. I mean, I think, and obviously with the Rams, you know, they always have that closeness, and so I would not be surprised if that is a midseason pickup.
Jim, with Gabe Davis, did you walk away wanting to trade more for Gabe Davis, or you're going to go scour all of the different teams trying to make that? Because I know how much you like Gabe Davis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think last year I had this feeling about Cooper Kupp that he was going to break out. I think Gabe Davis is this year's Cooper Kupp. Like, I don't know if he's going to do as good, but you saw he had 88 yards, 1 touchdown, possibly almost 2 touchdowns. He's actually going to be one of the people I'm going to try hard to trade for.
Interesting. Jed, out of the running backs between, in terms of Buffalo, you had Devin Singletary, 8 carries, 48 yards. He had 2 receptions, 14 yards. Zach Moss, 6 receptions, 21 yards, but 6 carries for 15 yards. Do you like any of them? Did any of them stick with you?
No, same situation as last year. You know, it's going to be a timeshare. They're going to flip between the two. It's tough, you know, with Moss, with hopefully getting more of the goal line carries, but Singletary definitely looked, you know, like the better running back overall. And then, of course, you guys know I like Cook, and he had that fumble that kind of screwed everything up. But no, I think it's the same situation as last year. If you had both those guys last year, it's going to always be a committee.
Speaking of the player of the game, Jim, let me go over to you. 26 of 31, 352 total yards, 4 touchdowns. He is 1-0 on the season. Mm-hmm. For Josh Allen, a lot of times some people were picking him in the 3rd round. Do you regret not picking him in the 3rd round, or are you happy? And yeah, you know what? He'll keep doing all these things, but I like waiting for my quarterbacks later on.
See, I always like picking quarterbacks. For me, I was targeting one of the big two, Justin Herbert or Josh Allen. I think there was a stat I was reading for the last 28 games. He's been the only quarterback in NFL history that's had 1 touchdown passing, 1 touchdown running. That's actually a really good stat, you know? And so that what you saw yesterday was he's able to do it on the ground, and he's able to do it with his arm. The only thing is they had a couple of bad mistakes where he threw those 2 interceptions, but otherwise, I mean, he would have scored so much more from a fantasy standpoint.
Did you guys see his stiff arm? For those of you who didn't watch the game,
they were just showing that.
Look up Josh Allen's stiff arm. He had it was a Derrick Henry-esque stiff arm on a sweep run. It looked great, and so go take a look at it.
I mean, think about it, guys. Like he's got Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox, right? All they need is a couple of good running backs, but they can figure out how to do it with Singletary and Moss and Cook. But he's got a pretty good team. His line, they kept saying his line is relatively weak, and so his line needs to do a better job protecting him. Otherwise, he's going to be forced to run all the time, and that's not always a good thing for the quarterback.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up over with this game, and then we're going to go into week 1? Any thoughts?
Who would you guys play next week, Cam Akers or Henderson?
Oh, I would actually. I mean, I think a lot of times Henderson would still be well, but I'm actually going to go and trade for Cam Akers across the league, because for all those guys who are worried about Cam Akers, I'm going to go start picking him up.
Yeah, it's not a bad move. I mean, it's definitely either got to be some rust or something just coming back from the injury, because that was just a really lopsided, carry split. Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's go over to week 1 real fast. Out of all of the games, I'd love to get some of your thoughts on some. We're not going to have time to go through all of the games, but let's start with some of those key games that we're looking at. Jed, I'm going to start with you in terms of Chicago Bears against the San Francisco 49ers. Which of those are you looking at? Which matchups are you excited about over in that game?
Well, I love this one. It's the rookie quarterbacks, or the sophomore quarterbacks, right? You got Trey Lance against Justin Fields. If you look at the line, San Francisco is coming into Chicago, but they're actually they're 7-point favorites. If I was a betting man, I actually would consider taking the Bears here. I think it's going to be closer than that. I think Trey Lance still has something to prove and to show. And I think Justin Fields is going to end up, hopefully playing a little bit better than people are expecting. But we'll see. I know the odds makers only have the Bears winning 4 or 5 games this season. So it's going to be a tough one. But I would take the underdog in this one.
Jim, on the San Francisco side, I'm interested in 2 players. I want to see how Eli Mitchell does. He always seems to have a tight hamstring. George Kittle's has been injured a lot of times with the hamstring as well too, and came up limp during practice. I want to see that. Oh, and the third one, how they use Deebo Samuel, knowing that he's only going to be seen as a wide receiver, right, or running back. Is he seen?
A wide receiver is wide receiver. Yeah. I think that's going to be the biggest question about Deebo Samuel, right? Like the question then becomes like, where should people have drafted him, and really what's going to be his role? Because if George Kittle's is limited, and Eli Mitchell, they always have these revolving doors of running backs. They're going to have to lean heavily on Deebo Samuel. The person who I think is going to break out this year, though, is Ayuk. I actually think that Ayuk's he's going to be that third-year receiver that's going to take the next level, and you're going to see some pretty good fantasy production from them.
Jed, what are you expecting out of David Montgomery as well as Darnell Mooney for this week?
Yeah, I mean, I like Montgomery, and I would just say, back on the Ayuk one. I mean, I like that as a potential. My issue is just Trey Lance. I mean, we got to see, if he really progresses or not. It's similar to the Tua situation in Miami. If he doesn't progress, if he plays like he did last year, it's not going to happen. San Francisco is going to be in a lot of pain, especially if Kittles hasn't practiced all week. If he's not in the game, that's going to really help the Bears because they're going to have an extra guy to play down on either Deebo or Ayuk. So people
have. I mean, all the commentators have high expectations of Deebo. Not Deebo for Trey Lance. If you look at the rankings and the expected points, Trey Lance is pretty high up there, more than Aaron Rodgers, more than Justin Fields. He's pretty high up there in terms of his anticipated fantasy production this year.
Jed, honestly, going back with Kittle, I know you like a Mark Andrews. I did not want George Kittle in all my leagues. I'm in 8 leagues. In one of my leagues, I do have a George Kittle, but you're always concerned because he's always going to have 1 or 2 really, really good games and sub-average games, but then he's going to be injured a lot as well, too.
Yeah, no, it looks like he's trending towards sitting. You just got to watch. Remember, if you guys forgot, with a lot of these the practices, you'll hear, missed the game, missed practice. The key one is Friday. If they practiced on Friday, then you're good for Sunday. If they miss Friday, then there's a good chance they're going to miss on Sunday. So just pay real close attention to that.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. Actually, I was going to say, side note also, I was just looking at my league as you guys were talking. I played Cam Akers and also Ellen Robinson in one of my leagues. So I said, oh, my gosh, I'm dead already.
Yeah, that kills you when you start with 0.
But if you have Josh Allen as the quarterback, you'll be – see, going back, that's why I like the big quarterbacks, because if you have one of those guys having bad weeks like that, Josh Allen will make up for it.
Yeah, there are bigger points. I mean, the one caution, again, I'd say is that game was, you knew there were going to be fireworks. That's the other thing. First 2 weeks of the season, it tends to be that, you get more kind of lopsided scores and more offensive output. So we'll just see if the Bills are really going to be that prolific of a passing team. It would be great if they were, but it reminds me of the Chargers. Like the Chargers, we know they're going to be throwing a lot. Cincinnati, we know they're going to be throwing a lot. But the Bills tended to be a little bit more balanced, but we'll see how that plays out. Yeah. But your original question too was back to David Montgomery and Darnell Mooney. And, I guess I would have, mild expectation. I mean, San Francisco is a good defense, and so I'm expecting them to play well. But as we know, Justin Fields can't do it alone, right? And so there's gonna have to be Montgomery, there's gonna have to be Mooney in there. And so I think you can expect like average, above average production out of those guys. But we'll see. This is the first game, so we don't know how it's going to play out. It might be wishful thinking on the Bears.
Let's stay on the Bears real fast. Side note before we talk about fantasy, they released plans for a new stadium over at Arlington Heights. What do you think about it? It's a brand new stadium. It's actually going to be a whole mini city of what they want to do.
I like it. I hope that it's true. We were just talking about this with one of the guys I drafted with. He has a house in Vernon Hills. We are just talking about the economic impact and would that actually raise prices? Because he was saying like, should I maybe even buy a second house and do like a bed and breakfast kind of thing and rent out the house, on game days? And I was like, that's an interesting idea, And so I hope they make the move. I think the lack of capacity has always been so concerning. Not being able to, fit in more people there, and so it could be really cool.
Did you see? So the Arlington Heights board yesterday approved of the plans for the Bears to move forward with starting plans and to start negotiating. And they were getting criticized because they were saying these guys are just letting the Bears do anything they want. But then, because I mean, honestly, you know how much economic development is going to happen there? The Bears have already said they don't want to go after public financing. They want to do this primarily through their own network as well as also investors because they think that it's going to really be a game changer for them.
And it's a good spot. If you guys, Arlington Heights had the racetrack there, and so they know in its heyday, they know they can handle that and the impact that it has. So it's the perfect location. I personally, I was sad about the Arlington racetrack. I went there before a couple times, had a great time.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Hey, but if I'm in the mayor of Arlington Heights, I am putting that as a feather in my cap that I brought economic development during my watch. That's
yeah. But okay, so fantasy. Okay, so one thing that I did read. I don't know if have you guys been reading about the new turf that they put on or the new grass that they put on Soldier Field? The coach did say, this is from the offensive coordinator. I was reading about it. He says that's going to be an advantage for our receivers and our running back because they'll be even that much faster because it's supposed to be a bigger improvement than what they've had in the last few years.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know, watching the turf.
Jim, let's go to this next game. It's not a fancy matchup, but I'm interested in the matchups here. Indianapolis Colts against the Houston Texans. More so, I want to see how Matt Ryan does. Look, everyone wants to see how Jonathan Taylor does he build off against from what he did last year, which was phenomenal. Who is your second receiver over at the Indianapolis Colts? How is Matt Ryan? How does he look on the Houston Texans side? What does a Lovie Smith offense look like? It's going to be the same boring, plotting offense where they give it over to Pierce the entire time, or who's their second receiver? Is it Miko Collins or what? What are you looking at, Jim?
Yeah, no, I'm actually I hope that it's going to be the same old Lovie Smith offense, right? Because then Dameon Pierce is going to skyrocket. I do think that you're going to see some really good games from Dameon Pierce. I'm expecting over 100 yards. I'm expecting at least 2 touchdowns from him. I think you're going to see Nico Collins emerge as that second wide receiver that eventually will become the number 1 receiver for Houston.
Yeah, I agree on this one. I think people are thinking Houston doesn't have a quarterback at all, with Deshaun Watson gone. Indianapolis is a 7-point favorite. This is a 7.5-point favorite. This is another one of the biggest spreads, but I would like to take the underdog on this one as well. I think you feed Pierce, you slow the game down, you get it a little bit more low scoring, and I think they can beat that spread.
Yeah.
Every single year there's a player I love. Last year was Antonio Gibson. Picked him across the board. This year has been Pierce. I'm going to pick him across the board. I'm trying to make trades. I see that Jimmy has Pierce on one team. I have Gabe Davis on another team. I'm going to be starting to make trades here. I have Kyle Pitts. I know Jimmy likes Kyle Pitts. He has Pierce. I'm going to try to make everywhere a goal. I love Dameon Pierce. I think he's a good just because of the offense that he plays in with Lovie Smith.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Pierce for Kyle Pitts. That's a tough one. I think I'd take Pitts on that one.
Hey, look, he is my Anthony Thomas. All right. He is Anthony Thomas all day. Jed, I'm going to go over to New England Patriots against the Miami Dolphins. Less more of the Patriots, but more of the Miami Dolphins. Wouldn't you say, Jed?
Yeah, this one's interesting. The Dolphins are the favorites here. But the fact, so don't forget, Devontae Parker is on the Patriots now, formerly of the Dolphins. So I'm expecting Parker to have a good game. So I kind of like the Patriots going in this. But as far as fantasy, all eyes are on Miami, right? We got to see if Tua is the real deal. We got to see what's the connection with Tyreek Hill. I'm expecting the offense, the plan to be really highly focused on Hill. And I expect, though, to see him running those short routes, not just being the burner on the outside. So that's a key thing to watch, not just his attempts and his catches, but where is he getting that? And if they are moving him all around the field, just trying to get the ball into his hands, I think that's a good sign for his production going forward.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, Pittsburgh Steelers against the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, Mitchell Trubisky, former Bear, has been named a starting quarterback. No one's picking up Chase Claypool. What are you excited about? Is it the Deontay Johnson? Is it seeing how Pickens does on one end, or seeing the high-powered offense of a Hayden Hurst over at the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, right? Like, I think Trubisky is going to be the key. Because that's really going to affect the Pickens. That's going to affect Claypool, Harris, all of, and also Deontay Johnson. I do think Johnson's going to continue to be the number one receiver, but I do see Pickens being that second receiver they're going to rely on, and not Claypool as well too. Last year, Najee Harris out-touched everybody and had more touches than any other fantasy player in the league outside of Christian McCaffrey. So I actually think that watching how they use him with the Trubisky offense is actually going to be important from a fantasy standpoint too.
Yeah. Jed, we were talking about last week or on Monday as well. Look, if you don't have a tight end sitting there, I actually would recommend that you watch either Freiermuth or Hayden Hurst over Cincinnati and see how well they do. A lot of times after your first top tight ends, everyone's a mix. But watch the Mo Alley Cox over in Indianapolis, see how Matt Ryan uses him. Look at Hayden Hurst and see how well he does. But at the same time, one of those three might actually be a potential hit if you're struggling at the tight end side.
Everybody was saying, I don't know if you guys heard this, but everybody was saying that if you were to choose between a Hayden Hurst or Mo Alley Cox, they actually choose a Mo Alley Cox, partly because they said Matt Ryan loves dumping off to his tight end, and he always has tight end that produces both from touchdowns as well as yards. So I think I would choose, even though I think Hayden Hurst is a better player, I think Mo Alley Cox from a fantasy perspective is going to be a better player this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that. There's a lot of different options. I was just going to say on that Indianapolis, the Cincinnati Pittsburgh game, I have Joe Burrow and Tom Brady in one of my teams, and I actually sat Joe Burrow and am playing Tom Brady. Mainly because it's an in-division game, and that game is always tougher than it looks. Like on paper, you think Cincinnati's going to roll over Pittsburgh, but because it's in the division, it's early in the season. I was just a little gun shy, and so I'm actually sitting Joe Burrow.
Yeah,
and honestly, against the Pittsburgh defense versus the Dallas Cowboys defense. Look, Dallas has improved a little bit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But man, Dallas sometimes could have a terrible defense.
Yeah, exactly. I'm expecting a shootout on that side, so I'm hoping that Brady will capitalize.
Yeah,
I do think.
Go ahead, Jim.
And go back on the Steelers. The Steelers. So I don't know what you guys think. I do think if you're in a dynasty league, someone to pay attention to will be a Kenny Pickett. I don't think that Trubisky is going to last the entire year. I think at some point they're going to bring in Pickett. I don't know if Pickett will ever become an all-star or an all-pro, but I do think he'll be like an Eli Manning. I think he'll be a pretty decent quarterback in the future.
Yeah. For those who are looking at your waiver wire, take a look at and watch Chase Claypool. He is largely ignored. Nobody expects a single thing. But a couple of years ago, he did pretty well. So at least watch him and keep him on your watch list and see how well he does. Jen, let me go over to you. Kansas City Chiefs against the Arizona Cardinals. Will we see a Kyler Murray that is out to prove that he does indeed study and prepare for games?
Yeah, it's, honestly, though, Kyler Murray is one guy I'm expecting to have a slow start to the season. So I'm actually, if you have options, that's another guy that you might want to consider sitting. Remember, he doesn't have Hopkins. It's just, I think it's going to be a little bit of a tricky situation for him. The Chiefs, on the other hand, I think they're going to be coming out, gangbusters and really trying to show the league that, hey, we didn't need Tyreek Hill. This wasn't about Tyreek Hill. This is about the offense and who we have here. So I'm expecting them to dominate in this one. They're only 3-point favorites, but I think they're going to win this one.
I would watch out for two players, right? Did you guys hear that Rondell Moore is most likely going to be out of this game?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so Rondell Moore injured his MCL, so they're going to have a reevaluation. But they're anticipating, unless something shows differently, that he might be out for a little bit. So Marquise Brown and Zach Ertz are the two players you're going to want to have to keep an eye out because they won't have DeAndre Hopkins or a Rondell Moore.
Mm.
Yeah. In one of our other leagues, Jed, and our friend Noah, who was not paying, I'm not sure if he's up on the NFL news, I traded him Cam Akers, Matthew Stafford, and I think there was someone else. He gave me Marquise Brown, J.K. Dobbins, and Kyle Pitts.
Well, Pitts is definitely the one to get out of there. So I'm sure he's mad at you now if you gave him Cam Akers and Stafford because he didn't get a lot of points out of that.
Yeah.
Well,
James Conner.
But it goes to our conversation about trades. He loves the Rams. He is a diehard Rams fan. And so for him, I gave him the 2 players that he was going to watch anyways. And so it allowed him to enjoy it.
If you're the commissioner of the league, would you veto that trade? Because it's clearly unfair.
No. I wouldn't veto. I mean,
I would let it happen, but you can tell one person definitely has the advantage over the other.
Yeah, on paper. But remember, I go back to our league where, Charlene had that trade that we thought was not great. It was Jamar Chase for Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. And really that's worked out for her. So, and I would have potentially vetoed that one. So,
Jed, speaking about that girl, I was looking at her lineup. She has Gabe Davis, Cortland Sutton, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. She's set for life over at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, no, it's for her. It's always been about running back. She's got to hit on a couple of those running backs. I think she's got ETN, right? Her. So she needs ETN to do well. If that happens, then she's going to win. But that's going to be her weak point is the running back.
Yeah. Jed, let's do one more game. Tampa Bay against the Dallas Cowboys. We were just talking about you're starting Tom Brady over Justin Burrow. What do you think of that game? Who are you looking at?
Yeah, I expect so Tampa's the favorite, although the line has moved actually in favor of the Cowboys. Started at 2.5 for Tampa, is now down to 1.5. But I expect Tampa to win this game. I think Dallas is still working out the kinks. There is a little bit of a question mark on Dak Prescott, so I'm hoping that's just not anything serious. But
you know what it is?
What is it?
His cleats. I'm watching ESPN right now. They said he's been trying these new cleats out. And he doesn't like them, so that's the issue.
Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot. So on the Dallas side, we really want to see, okay, Zeke Elliott, like, is this the Zeke Elliott of old? Is it the Zeke Elliott that we all think, he was drafted really in the third round, second, third round, sometimes even fourth rounds. Tony Pollard, how much action does he get as the number 2 running back? Is he really always in on third down, passing third downs? Is he, integrated more into the passing offense? There were reports during preseason that he was actually running out of the slot, which would be very interesting if that's true. CeeDee Lamb, of course, I think we're all expecting he'll be the true number 1. He'll play well. There'll be good rapport with Dak Prescott. But I think Michael Gallup is still out. So
he's going to be out week 1.
Yeah, so he's still out week 1, which means also Dalton Schultz. Expecting him to do pretty well, as the tight end in Dallas. So on the Dallas side, I think there's a lot of points to be had.
And on the Buccaneers side, Chris Godwin is completely in, right? So you got Godwin, you got Fournette, you got Evans. I think who's
Julio Jones.
He's like I am watching Julio Jones.
Yeah, Julio Jones. So yeah, I think Tom Brady is going to be Tom Brady. I think that those guys are going to be fine. And I expect a really good year from Fournette.
You know what we should do is we should place bets on Tom Brady's marriage lasting the season, because that's I think going to be the issue.
Yeah. Hey, I'm telling you, Julio Jones, if there is all reports saying that he has a great connection with Tom Brady, I want to see how well Julio Jones is, because 2 years ago, you were still drafting him pretty high. Last year was not, but man, I'm excited to see how Julio Jones does.
Oh yeah, he's sitting on a lot of waiver wires, and the reports they're saying is that he's looking like he's back to his old self. So if that is true, that's really, but you know what, actually that's going to potentially eat into, because then it'll be 3 mouths to feed with Evans, Goodwin, and him. So we'll have to just see how it goes.
Well, and you got to think, right? I don't know who recruited Julio Jones, if Tom Brady was the one who made the phone call.
It was Brady.
Was it Brady? They always say Brady makes a phone call. He always wants to make sure that he takes care of free agents, right? Gronkowski, Fournette, Jones. So you're right that he might need it. I actually think between Evans and Godwin, it'll affect Evans more than Godwin.
Yeah. Are you guys even looking at Cameron Brate?
No.
Not me.
No, I think maybe Kyle Rudolph might be the better tight end option, but no, I'm not looking at Cameron Brate.
Got it. All right. Hey, let me ask you guys a quick question as we begin to wrap up our time here. Actually, let's go over to trade. If you guys, I mean, pretty much, I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of your trade strategy. For some of us, I love trading. It is part of the game. It is something that really gets all the juices flowing, all that stuff. Some people get mad by trades. Some people don't respond to trades. I'd love to hear a little bit. I'm going to start off with you, Jim. What is your trade strategy when making trades? Do you like trades? Do you make a lot of trades? What are some of the things that you do? Do you explain to people when you see a bad trade why you need the trade and respond to them and let them know what they need to do to make the trade better? What's your strategy?
I actually, you know what? I like to have fair trades, right? Like, so if you're sending me a trade that's 5 players for 1 player, I already know it's 5 crappy players for one of my really good ones. So I usually don't like to make that trade unless I need those players. I think the second is there's usually a couple players that I'm targeting, right? Like right now, Gabe Davis, for instance, is a player I really like. Russell Wilson is somebody I really would like. And so I'm really working hard to try to find those players. So I really look at what my opponents need. You know, do they need running back or a wide receiver? Do they need a quarterback? And then I'll try to pitch something to them that they need for a player that I want as well, too.
And you want J.J. Smith-Schuster, too.
Yeah, I like Juju Smith. I think he'll be really good. But Darnell Mooney I've drafted. I've been wanting to get rid of him. David Montgomery I've been trying. So there's also players on my team that I would like to get rid of. I also am the type for if I were to choose between a Julio Jones or let's say a Chris Olave, the rookie, I'd rather go for the rookie than the old veteran. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, especially in our keeper league, that makes a lot of sense because, you know, if you hit, it pays out for more times. I mean, I agree as far as I always like trades that are win-win. But the one thing I would say is I like to trade from bench strength to bench strength because I'm always looking at starters. Like it's really, you know, people who are trying to trade me for someone that's just going to end up sitting on my bench. It doesn't make any sense, even if it's a really good player. So if you look at my team, generally speaking, the flex position is where you can tell what I think is weak. And so then that, you know, if you figure that out, then you can kind of, you know, make the appropriate you know, suggestion or trade suggestion. The other thing, though, is interesting what you're saying about, you know, 2-for-1s or 3-for-1 trades. Generally speaking, and I know, Tommy, I think you're the opposite of this. You seem to like to get the more players out, like being willing to give up 1 star player for maybe 3 or 2, where there's potential for 1 to be a star, but they aren't proven. I'm the exact opposite. I really like, you know, I prefer giving 2 of my guys away and getting 1 back because especially in leagues like ours where we have a shorter bench on purpose, I like having that open bench spot to go then look for someone else on the waiver wire. And so I personally rather do it that way.
And Jed, I will probably argue I love trade assets. My problem is a lot of times if I suddenly trade 3-for-1 and I get that 1 and that person is injured, I'm out for the year. But I'm always accumulating trade assets because my biggest strategy is toward the end of the day, I'm looking at people who are injured. I want to trade for that guy who's injured and will come in. I'm fine with the 8-8 record, get me into the playoffs. Or then I start pilfering all those guys who are either just right below the playoffs or out. And then I start making trades with those guys who don't really care. And then they'll start making flipping trades all day. But even with Jimmy or even with you is I'm always going to test the water. So I'm going to give you a trade request initially. Kind of unfair. You're going to get a little mad and angry, but sometimes you'll take it and then I win, but then you'll reject it. And now I know where my starting point is for me to start trading with you.
The brother of our dentist friend we're in the league with, does not like Tommy's trades. So he was talking when Tommy sends these trades, he doesn't respond. He sends him back a crappy trade. So that's where it doesn't really work. But I think Tommy's strategy, here's Tommy's strategy. He doesn't care if he finishes 8-8, right? Like as long as he can squeak in the playoffs, his goal is I want to make sure I have the best team for the playoffs. So he'll go for the DeAndre Hopkins. He'll go for the Cam Akers when he comes back during the end of the year. Players that most people don't want because they want to win initially and be that number 1, number 2, or number 3 ranked team.
But for me, a lot of times is I need to know my player. How low are you willing to go? What's your price? A lot of times, and I need to throw the bait in the water to see what will hook you on, and that sets me up for the entire season for me to trade with you.
But then there are also some players, people who will never trade, right? Yeah. You'll send something to them, they'll never respond, and then there are some people that you'll know will respond pretty fast. I know I can't pull a fast one over Jed, but I know that there's other people in our league that you can pull a fast one over.
Oh,
Thanks,
yeah.
Jimmy. I
I get
appreciate
annoyed,
that.
Jim. I'm not sure if you guys get annoyed. Look, if you send a trade offer, if you know you don't want it, or just at least pay attention to it, reject it, accept it, whatever. And for those guys that just let it sit there, that actually is the one part that annoys me because you have no idea what they're going to do. And so you eventually just don't trade with them anymore.
Oh, I'll do that, Tommy. I'll sit there because sometimes if someone offers me something ridiculous, I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to sit there and wait and see if, basically sometimes what can happen is you're waiting and then one of those guys gets injured. Like, let's say you're trying to trade for my guy gets injured in practice. You left that trade option out there. Now I hit accept. Now what are you going to do? Like, now you're the guy that offered that, right?
Jet, that's happened to me a couple of times where I've offered something and then I'm not paying attention to it, right? They haven't accepted it. And during the week, that person got injured. Well, now they've accepted it. That's the worst.
But to me, I'm like, you made that crazy trade offer in the first place. So I'm going to, you got to pay for it. Right. That's because I actually, Tommy, don't like that strategy of like, you're trying to find the floor, because I guess the question to ask you is, are you always willing to accept it if it's totally lopsided? And to me, that's the kind of trade partner I don't want. Right. Like, I want a trade partner who really thinks it's fair, like truly thinks it's fair for both sides. Otherwise, I know you're just trying to like get me. Right. And so like, then I don't want to work with you. But if it's like, we're trying to work it out so that we both can do that, then I can see that.
But
go ahead.
What if you explain it, right? Like, so if I send you something, Jed, I like to be able to say, here's why I would like to propose it to you, right? So a lot of times I'll text the other person and says, hey, I know you need a tight end. I'm sending you this tight end in exchange for this receiver. Here's why I think it works for both of us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you explain it, but like to Tommy's point, basically, to me, if you send a trade offer that you wouldn't accept on the other side, then like, that's not good. Like, that's not true. To me, that's not being a good trade partner, right? Like, you're just trying to that's playing the way the NFL plays, which is they're always trying to get the best deal. But I don't think that's the way like it works for me. Like, that's not how I want to do it.
Now, I would probably argue, like, for instance, I'm not going to ask you for Jonathan Taylor, and I'm going to give you Chris Olave, George Pickens, Russell Wilson, Kyle Rudolph, or something like that. Okay, then you're just screwing with the person. But if you know the guy's not always paying attention to, like, for instance, you both, I probably know that you know the news and notes of the day. Some people may not be. So I may trade them, let's say, for Najee Harris. Let's do a Russell Wilson and AJ Dillon. I think that's I would do a fair trade. I would want Najee Harris or something like that. So he's just trying to figure out ways. You're not going to screw the person or take advantage of that person, but something that actually helps you a little bit more. Yeah. And see and some people just are not paying attention to some of these things.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely a lot of people that don't. Well, I think we are the exception in terms of how much you're watching it. Well, actually, that's not true. There's a lot of people who are probably like half your league is really into it, and the other half is just kind of throwing stuff out.
Yeah. Oh, that's Jimmy. Like, for instance, the other day we had a auction league. And so I started noticing during our auction league, money's going down. I have $100 left. Everyone is at 30 something dollars. 3 teams has no quarterbacks. They just have no quarterbacks, and they're just not able to afford the quarterback. So what do? I start picking all the quarterbacks. So I picked up Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew. So now suddenly I have 4 quarterbacks on the team. Well, I'm going to start packaging all these guys in the trade.
That is smart, right? Yeah.
So there was one league I was in where a guy he went on auto draft, so he knew he couldn't be there. So, but he set up his list. But the funny thing is he thought once it filled the position, it would go to the next one. And so his first like 4 picks were all quarterbacks. And instead he got all 4 quarterbacks. And so we were like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to this guy? But just like you said, Tommy, he ended up doing okay. In fact, I think he made the playoffs because he ended up trading away those guys and getting decent people back. And it ended up working out.
Can I just say, I just saw the news and I was looking. So Michael Thomas is limited in practice. They're speculating he may not necessarily play in the first game. And then also Walker from Seattle, Kyle Walker, the rookie running back. Kenny Walker. Kenny Walker most likely will not play as well too. So those are 2 players. Like the Michael Thomas thing is a big thing, right? Because I have Chris Olave And so if Michael Thomas is not playing, you're going to see Chris Olave move up. And I actually think that Chris Olave is a pretty decent receiver.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I think he could definitely. I actually think Olave is better than Thomas. I would expect.
I don't trust Thomas. I was looking at this. I don't trust a lot. Thomas has been drafted pretty high. I'm not high on Thomas this year.
Agree. He's older now. I think it's it felt like he was starting on his way down.
Yeah.
Well, one game in week 1 is already in the books. Sunday will be a busy day. Monday night, there's 2 games, so it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, we're going to come back on Wednesday, and then from that point, Wednesday to Friday is going to be our rhythm. So looking forward to that. And pretty soon, a lot of times, baseball season, playoffs is about to begin. NBA season is wrapping up. By the way, EuroLeague, did you know that Giannis, Dragic, and Doncic and all those guys are still playing ball? I was just listening to a podcast. Doncic is playing 5 games in 7 days in the EuroLeague these days.
Did you see how well he's been doing against some of the best teams in Europe? They were playing highlights last night on SportsCenter. That guy is good. But
he almost had 50 points. He had 47 points in one game.
He's more muscular now too.
Yeah, Giannis though tweaked his ankle, so that was a little concerning.
Yeah.
One last thing that stuck with me. I'm not sure if you guys saw in one of the commercials promoting Sunday Night Football. Somehow or another, they got Michael Jordan to sit there and promote the next. I'm sure in the world to get Michael Jordan to do something like this.
Yeah. It's a goat versus goat thing. Yeah, you go see it.
That's funny.
All right, guys, we'll talk on Wednesday.
Okay.